Okay, so welcome back to this channel. So now in this video we will learn that how we can use Docker with Next.js. Basically how we can containerize our application, Next.js application with Docker. I hope that you know about Docker. If you don't know, Docker is basically like a tool that helps us to containerize our application. So in that container we can define our own environment, and that basically helps us to deploy our application anywhere without worrying about the environment. So now let's start the video. First of all, you need to download the Docker. You go to docker.com and you have to download the Docker from the official website. So you can download that according to your operating system. I already have downloaded Docker. If I can open here, you can see that this is my Docker application. I have no container. You can see that here. So, and to verify that, just go to your terminal and type here docker-v. You can see that here. You will get the Docker version here. Okay. So I hope that now you have installed the Docker on your computer. Now let's first of all create our next application, and then we will learn that how we can use Docker with Next.js. So first of all, let's create our application. I will simply type here npx create -next-app at latest, and I will call it Docker with Next.js. Okay, so let's create a new application. I will choose yes, no, yes, yes. I will use the default setting, and now it will create our Next.js application. Okay, so our application is now created. Now let's open that in VS Code. Okay, so this is my Next.js application. If I open a new terminal here, first of all, let's run it npm run dev. So we will run it like we run usually with npm run dev. And now if I open my application, you can see that this is our Next.js application. Okay, so now let's integrate Docker with our application. First of all, if I go to my VS Code, first of all, you can also view all the containers in the Docker application. And also you can use the CLI if you want, like you can simply type in here Docker ps-a, and that will give you a list of all the containers. Okay, you can use the command line, otherwise you can use this Docker software to quickly see your Dockers, delete Docker, or see your images. Okay, so first of all, we have to create a file in the root of this folder with the name Dockerfile. Okay, so I will type in here Dockerfile. You can see that here we get here Docker icon. So Dockerfile is a file in which we write all the instructions on how to build the Docker image. Okay, so first of all, we have to give here the base image. So for that we will use node. I will type here from, and now we have to give in here the base image, and our base image is going to be node.js. If I go back to my Chrome, you can see that here this is hub.docker.com, and here you can search all the container images. I type here node.js, and if I press enter, so let's type here node.js. So I open that. You can see that this is the official image of Node.js. Now we have to use that. Now there are two different versions. One is simple Node and one is Node Alpine. So Alpine means that it is a lightweight image of Node.js. You can use Node and you can use this Alpine. We will use Alpine because this is our simple application. So if I go back, I can simply type here from Node. Okay, then type the version, which is 22. You can see that here 22, and then we can use in here -Alpine. Okay, if you don't want to use Alpine, you can simply remove this part like this. Okay, so from Node version 22 Alpine, which is the lightweight version of Node, as base. Okay, so this is the name of the stage, which is base. Okay, so now we have given the base image. Now we have to write other instructions. First of all, I have to define in here the working directory. So I will type here work dir, which is working directory, and the path is going to be /source. So this source is going to be our working directory inside the Docker container. Okay, so this is going to be our working directory inside the container, and I will show you that once we run our application with Docker. Okay, so now we have defined here the working directory, right? Our working directory is going to be /source in Docker container. Next, we have to copy our main file, which is package.json file to dot. Okay, so this is our source and this is our destination. So basically this copy is going to copy this package.json file from our local directory to the container working directory. Okay, so after copying that, we have to install all the packages. We have copied the package.json, and now we know that to install packages we use a command that is called npm install. So I can simply type here that run npm install. Okay, so that will install all the packages, all the dependencies that are defined in package.json. Okay, and now we again have to use copy. So copy, and I will type here dot dot. Now this command is going to copy all the files from the local directory to the working directory inside the container. Okay, and after that, after copying the file, we just have to run our application. And first of all, let's run our application in development. So I will type here cmd and then the command that we want to execute. I type here npm run dev, and this, we know that this command is used to run our Next.js application in development mode. If I simply save it, and this is our Docker file that will help us to run our application in development mode. Again, first of all, we have used here base image, which is Node.js version 22, and Alpine is the lightweight version of this Node image. And then we have defined the working directory inside our container that is going to be source. You can change that if you want. Then we will copy our file from the local directory to the working directory of container. And now we have copied the package.json file. We have to install all the packages, and then we will copy all the files, project files from the current directory or local directory to the working directory of container. Copying all the files, we have to run our application in development mode. Okay, so now we have defined our Docker file. Now let's see how we can run that. You can see that here no container is running at this moment. First of all, we have to use a command that is called docker build. We have to build the image, okay, dash t, and then we have to type in here the name of the image. So let's say I call it Docker Next.js. Okay, so this is the name of our image, and then I type here dot that find the Docker file in the current directory, which is right here. So now if I press here enter, you will see that it started building our Docker image. So we get here some error, and we got error on this line, and the spelling is wrong. That is Alpine, like this. Okay, so now let's run this same command again. So now it will take some time. You can see that it has basically used this source directory, then copied our package.json file. Now it is running the npm install to that will install all the packages inside our Docker container, and I will show you container in a minute. So now you can see that after npm install, it has copied all the file, and now we have successfully created our Docker image. And now if I go back to my Docker software, you can see that we don't have any container, but if I go to image, you can see that here we have our image that we have just created, and that is Docker Next.js. Okay, so our image is successfully created, and now we have to basically start our application with Docker. So for that, I will use docker run command. So I will type here docker run, okay, dash it. So dash it basically stands for interactive. That basically allow us to interact with our container command line. So I will use here docker dash it for interactive mode, and then I will use here dash v. So dash v is used to mount volume inside the container, and we know that our volume is source. So I will simply type here dash v dot and then slash src. Okay, and then we have to define here our port. So for that we will use dash p. So dash p basically help us to publish the container ports to the host machine. So we can define in here our ports. We know that by default Next.js on port 3000. So I will type here 3000 colon 3000. Okay, so this is the port which Next.js use by default. Okay, and then we can use here our own port, like I can choose here 400, 4000, 5000. Okay, let me use that 3000 here for now. Now we have defined here our port, and next we have to put in here the name of our image, and our image name is docker-next.js. Okay, so now if I press here enter, it will run this image, and you can see that here now we are running this command. Okay, now we are running it with the Docker. If I open that, you can see that here it will open our Next.js application. So you can see that here our application is now successfully running on port 3000, and we can also change the port if you want. I can choose here, like I want to use here 4000 for example. Now if I run this command again, if I open that, now you can see that no application is running on 3000. We have to use here 4000, like this. Okay, Now you can see that our application is now running on port 4000. Alright, so now we are running our Docker with this Docker run command. If I go back to my Docker and if I go to the container, you can see that here we have our Docker container. If I click on that, you can see that our image is Docker Next.js, and this is running on port 3000. And if I go here in the files, you can see that here we have this source directory in which we have our entire basically Next.js application. You can see that here we have ts.config package.json app directory where we have our applications. So this is our working directory inside the container, that is the source. Okay, we can also use here one more file that is called docker ignore. Like we have this git ignore that will ignore some files and don't push these files on the GitHub. So in the same way we can use docker ignore like this. Okay, so that will ignore all the files that don't want to push in our Docker container. For example, I can type in here next.config.mjs file. I can use here .git ignore. I can use in here my Docker file. I don't need that inside the Docker. So in this way I can define all the files that I don't want inside the Docker. So this Docker ignore will ignore all the files. Now we have to define one more file here that is called docker compose.yaml file. We know that we have to write these set of instructions to run our Docker, and we can put all these instructions inside a separate file that is called YAML file. Let me create here a new file with the name compose.yaml. This file I can write all the instructions that I am defining in here. So first of all I will type in here services. Under the services I have to use here app, and then in here I can define all the instructions that I want to use. First of all I'm going to type in here build command. So for the build we have to give here context. So our context is going to be dot, which is the current directory, like this. Okay, and then we can define here our docker file. So I will use here docker file is going to be this docker file. Okay, after this build we can define one more option here that is called ports, like we are defining in the command. Okay, so for the ports I will use here dash, and then you can use in here like 3000 colon 3000. You can change that if you want. We have defined our build that use the current directory, docker file is this, port is this, and after the ports we can define one more here that is called volumes. Remember that we are also using here dash v for volume, which is the source directory. So I will write that here, and that is going to be dash and dot colon slash src. So now we have created our docker compose.yaml file. That file basically help us to define how the containers are going to run together. Okay, so now we have our docker file, we have our docker compose file. Now we have to run our application, and before running that I have deleted all the images and the containers. Let's run this application. So for that I will use docker dash compose up. Okay, so now this docker compose up will use this file to run our application. So if I press here enter, you can see that it is now building. So copying the files, and now we have our application running on port 3000. If I go back to my Docker, you can see that here now we have this container and we have this image that is Docker with Next.js dash app. So this is now created with the Docker compose. Okay, so now if I simply go back, now our application is running successfully like this. Okay, so now we have defined our docker file, docker compose file, .git, .docker ignore file. Now this is only for development, but we know that we have two different stages in our basic application. One is the development and one is the production. Okay, so how we can handle that with the Docker? Okay, so for that we have to create a separate file for development and then for the production. So for the development, first of all I will rename this file to dockerfile.dev, and this is the file that we'll use for development, and this is the file docker compose.yaml that we will use for development. So docker compose I will use here dash dev.yaml. okay, and now here my docker file is dockerfile.dev like this. Okay, and now to run that I have to simply type in here docker compose dash f, which is the file, and our file name is going to be docker docker compose dev.yml. Okay, and then we can use here -d for detached mode. Okay, so it will run the container in the background, and then we can also use here dash build command to build our application. If I press here enter, we get here error. So that is going to be docker compose. I will use here up -d. Now if I press here enter, you can see that now it is building again. So now you can see that it is running in detached mode. Our container is running in the background. If I type here docker ps-a, -a, you can see that here this docker with Next.js app is now running in the background. Now this is for the development, and for the production I will create separate file that is going to be dockerfile.prod, and the second file name is going to be docker compose-prod.yml. Okay, you can put all these files inside a separate folder with the name docker, but I will keep that in the root. So now we know that in the build, first of all we have to run npm run build to build the production build, and then we have to use npm start to start our application in production mode. Now for this production I will use multi-stage Dockerfile. So we are going to have two different stages. One is going to be build stage that will build our production build. Then we are going to have our production stage that will use that build to run our application in production. Okay, so first of all we have to give in here the base image that is going to be node version 22 again, and I will use Alpine, and I will use it as build. So the stage name is going to be build. So in this stage we are going to run npm run build that will build the production build basically. So first of all the working directory, and that is going to be again source, and then we have to copy our package .json from dot, and again we have to run npm run install, and then we have to copy all the files from the local directory to the container working directory, and after that we have to run here npm run build. Okay, we know that if I go to my package.json, we use this npm run build command to build our Next.js production build. Okay, so now this stage will be responsible for building the application, and now this is our, I can type in here that let's call it build stage, and now let's type in here production stage. So for the production I will use the base image. So I will type here from build, which is our base image, from build as, and I will use here production for the name of the stage. So I will use this build as my base image as production, and on this production we have to basically copy all the files from this build, and then we have to use npm start to run our application. Okay, so we have to use here a bunch of copy commands. So copy, so we have to copy dash dash. You can see that here we have this syntax dash dash from is equal to stage. So here I will use that, and our stage is, we know that this is build, because we know that we have used this build stage to build our application. So copy from build, and now we have to copy that in the basically source and .next. We know that we have our build files in this next folder. Okay, so source next, and then that is going to be .next directory. So in this line basically we are copying from this build stage. Okay, we are copying from the source .next directory, and we are copying that to the current directory of the Docker image that is being built in this .next directory. Okay, and after this .next we also have to copy the node modules. So I will simply copy paste that from the build. I will copy source, then node underscore modules, and I will simply copy that and put that in here. And after copying node modules, you also have to copy the package.json. So package.json, and I will copy that again and put that in here. And then after that we also have to copy in here the public folder for our assets. So I will copy this public and I put that in here. So after copying all the files, we just have to run here cmd npm start to start our application in production mode. First of all let's run it, and then I will explain it again. And before running that, we have to write our instructions inside the docker compose -prod.yaml. So I will copy all these from here and I put that here, and we don't need here volume. Okay, and for the docker file, that is dockerfile.prod, and for the port, I will run my production in on port 8080 like this. Save it, and now to run it in basically production, we have to use that command again, and that is this, but this time we have to use docker compose -prod. And now if I press here enter, so now it will build our production build, and then it will run that with npm start. You can see that here. So it is running the npm run build that will build the production build. So now you can see that it is copying the files, and now it is ready. So now if I go back to my Chrome, and if I open here localhost port 8080, so now it will run our application in production mode. This is the production build. And if I actually go back just to show you, go in the app page.tsx, let's use in here process.env.node.env. If I save it, go back, if I reload the page, you can see that we don't get here any value because we are running the production build. If we want to see this result again, we have to run this command again to build the new production build. But if I run in my development mode, let me show you. If I type here dev, so now let's run this application. If I go back, and now if I reload this page, so getting started with editing, and this is our development. This is the development mode. And even if I change something, like type here some gibberish like this, if I reload, you can see that we get here that, but we don't get that in the production. If you want to see that in production, we have to build that again. So let me run my application again in production. So I will build again. Okay, so now if I go back, and now if I reload this page, you can see that now we get here production. So in this way we can build our two different files for development and production, and we have made a multi-stage docker file for our production. First of all, the first stage is going to be build stage, that is going to basically just run npm run build to build our application. Okay, then we have use this production stage. So the production stage we will use from build. Our base image is going to be this build stage as production. Now in that we just have to copy all the files and then just run npm start, and we are copying from our build stage. So dash from is equal to build, and then we just have to copy all the files from this source directory to the current directory of the docker image being built. Okay, so this is dockerfile.prod and this is dev. So that's it for this video. You can find the source code of this video in the description of this video. I will add the link of the git repo. Okay, so I will see you in some other video.